speaker is Gilles Costin, that I know amongst many reasons, but also because he lives like 2 blocks down the roads, pretty much. And he has a background in biology, and he did his PhD in neuroscience, and he's now a scientific designer and illustrator. And he's going to talk to us about sort of his work and where he came from, and what he does now every day for a living. So Gilles, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Remy, and thanks for the invitation. Okay, yes, indeed. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what is it that I do exactly, right? So as Remy mentioned, I have a background, I have a PhD in neuroscience, and then after my PhD, I started doing visual science communication in a scientific science communication office. And this is, actually, I hear this a lot. So my girlfriend, she's also cognitive neuroscientist, and this when we are in a pre-pandemic era, when we were in a party or something and we meet new people, and then she has to introduce me. So Gilles is doing designing for scientists, and people get a little bit puzzled. So imagine I was a scientist before, so whenever I had to explain to my friends what I was doing, I got, just people resumed what I was doing by some training some rats, right? So now imagine that you have another layer on top of this, and I have to explain what I'm doing to my fellow scientists. So for this, I'm going to very briefly talk to you about the space of possibilities. So what is it that we do as science designers or illustrator? And I'm taking a little bit the approach of Jan Christiansen from Scientific American. So Scientific American is a magazine that publishes science to the general audience, and they have art directors there, so people that choose what type of illustrations or figures go into the magazine. And she gave a talk, and she defined basically these spectrums of things. So in one side, you have editorial illustrations, and I'm going to tell you what they could be. And the other side's something more related to information, so explanations, right? So let's, and basically I'm going to tell you about this spectrum using my own work, but also works of other people, so that you can get at least some references of people that if you're interested about, you can search for them. Because I found that actually a big thing moving into a different field, in my case from neuroscience to design and illustration, is actually to get the names, get the sources, and spend a lot of time digging into a space of people that do these type of things. And just like in science, we have to have our references, right? So yeah, let's move on. One of the things that we can do, illustrators, to communicate science, is editorial illustrations. And one example is covers, right? So covers is whenever you publish a paper, you are super happy, you got this message from the editors telling you your paper is just accepted. And there's normally like a paragraph where the editor asks, if you have submission, image submission for the cover, feel free to share it. It's a brilliant way to propagate this give us content for free kind of a scheme in academia, but it's also like a nice cherry on top of your cake, right? So most of the times, maybe the scientist itself would not have the time or feel that he would not have the skill to propose a nice image, so they can come to an illustrator and ask it. And so these are two covers that I prepared. Actually, this one is my first ever cover, and this is the last cover that was published last year, pandemic time. So in the first cover, for instance, and Simon was actually talking about analogies before, and what I do for the covers and illustrators in general is just creating a metaphor. So this is not informative, this is a metaphor of science. And in this case, it was a paper on how the motor cortex EFIS recordings in rodents while they were doing a time that involved estimating how much would we be, I mean, the rodent would be willing to wait. So it involved time, and in the motor cortex, they would there was two different types of firing patterns, one which was probabilistic and one which was deterministic. So in this case, I used the normal dices to say that sometimes you just roll the dice and a number might come, and dices that actually just have one number there, right? So these would be the deterministic dices. On the right, I'm showing you something that I've prepared for the lab of Ole Kien in Denmark, Copenhagen, where they found out the population of neurons in the spinal cord that was responsible for animals to turn left or right. And this happened, I formulated this image when during the lockdown, I was just bored at night playing a PlayStation, and I had this assignment on my head, and then I just looked at the controller and said, okay, yeah, okay, so this is it. I could just draw a rodent brain and have it being controlling like a Super Mario Kart kind of thing. And just more examples. For instance, this one was on someone who, a lab group that was studying cerebellum and how actually associative learning, so something related to Pavlov kind of conditioning, the learning itself would be improved with movement. So I put the Pavlov dog going for a walk before he got trained. Or this one was for Konrad Kording's lab. Study where they put patients with Parkinson's, so where they basically propose that dopamine is related, or the lack of dopamine is related to accumulation of evidence, and how this actually basically shapes your likelihood functions in the Bayesian framework. So these are just overall stories, right? And you know, you prepare covers, and most of them actually don't go in, right? It's a very competitive process for me. I have a bunch of them prepared, only a few selected. But the good thing is that you can always use a good illustration to communicate with the audience. So whenever you publish again, you have to prepare a press release that is going to be sent out to the media. Most of the times, journalists, they just take copy paste your text and put in their journals, but or magazines, but they normally, you know, if they don't have an image, they will just they'll Google it or go to Getty Images, and normally, at least in my field, they'll put someone pipetting, or this the infamous 3D blue guy with you know, I don't know, like the brain in magenta popping up. So if you can provide an image to the journals themselves, then really a nicer looking and more specific to your research thing can go into your press release. So you can use illustrations to engage with the public directly, also via you know, these are kind of TED Talk like events where these events, they needed you know, posters, right? So you know, and posters are also kind of analogies of what's going on. Another kind of approach is to use comics. It's not my style, but it's something that I see a lot around. And they can also go to press releases. This is Matteo Farinella work, which is amazing. I invite you to see. He's now working at the Zuckerman Institute in Columbia as a resident science communication, and they're doing amazing work. And actually, when I was searching yesterday at Twitter at Matteo's work, I found out this post here. So apparently the University of Luxembourg, which I guess it's part of this conference here, they came out like last year with this program where they united 20 comic drawers to PhD students. So they have 20 PhD theses explained by comic books. And I thought that Belgians were the comic people. I guess you have to jump in and do better. And of course, like institutions, they have to communicate itself. So it's not just the scientists, but either like big consortia, when the big scientists, big groups of science get together, they need a common identity, right? So that's why what logos are for, to generate identities. Or scientific institutions, they need to do these boring reports and the reports can be a little bit less boring if some either infographics or illustrations are put in there to explain these all these concepts of how many people we hired and what did we do. And institutions also either have PhD programs or they do conferences, and all these they can use a very good design to show, you know, to communicate, let's say. Okay, so this was everything that does not really have to do with information itself, but more to analogies or to design itself. But if we dwell into the realm of really graphics that want to explain things, and again, using Ann Christensen's kind of graded analysis, you can think of something that goes to more figurative to a world which is more abstract. And in the figurative realm, you can have these types of diagrams where realism is really necessary, such as what you see here. Now, I have to say that I really suck at drawing, right? I'm not good at drawing at all. And these are the kind of things that I would really not be able to do. But I'm just putting here as examples. So sometimes if you're working in ecology or environmental, I don't know, or if you have to really depict how a fish looks and which is different from another species, then you would have these types of drawings. Pedro Salgado is an amazing Portuguese science illustrator, and it's, I guess, if you think of science illustration, this would be the most canonical way of thinking what an illustrator does. But you could also go to more you know, medical illustrations kind of thing, and this is really something serious. You know, people really go into almost medical school to be able to draw this type of things. They are super useful if you want to explain difficult procedures for surgeries, for instance. And during my research, I saw that actually Maastricht has a really good program for science, for medical illustration, a master that I was thinking of taking, but I don't think I can do it, you know, my hands. And then this is something totally different, let's say, but it's still really, really accurate. So this is David Goodsell. I invite you all to follow this guy on Twitter. Is Salk. He works at the Salk Institute. He's a structural biologist, part scientist, part illustrator. And what he's depicting here, this is actually work commissioned by me in a project. It's a synapse of, I think this is inhibitory synapse, where everything that you see here should be there. So even structurally, it should look like that. So he goes and checks how the protein really look like, and puts there everything compact, and really gives you a snapshot of what you should expect given electron microscopy data. We just see how much am I think on time or not. So this is okay, so this is realism, Russ. This is really how things kind of should look like. And this is different dimension, not related to how things kind of look like, but we are jumping into the realms of data. And I have to say here that although I come from a scientific background, I never had the opportunity to really jump into this world, and something that I think we scientists, we kind of could take more advantage of our skills. I mean, this is just one piece among so many others. This is Nature prepared for their anniversary two years ago, a data viz where they just depict all the papers that they published in their 150 years history, clump them together, try to find some clusters, see if papers originated fields almost, and it's very interesting to explore. I would invite you to do that. And basically, this is a field that it's blooming lately, and I wanted to take this time just to give you some references of people which I found, and how did actually I started doing this job, right? So basically, Data Visualization Society just had a conference not so long ago. It's called Outlier conference, which has on YouTube a bunch of videos. Their conference are on videos. I invite you to check them. Flowing Data is a blog, and here you have a bunch of different names of people. Actually, Martin Lambrecht and Karim. They're Belgium. Nadi, I think she's Dutch. She at least works in the Netherlands. Cedric here is still I think he's still a postdoc, and the work that he does on R, it's mind blowing, and it gives you really, as a blog where he really gives you the idea that he spent like 2 years just doing visualizations and getting good at it, and now he's just a pro. But I would like you to focus here on this collection of papers. It's called Nature Collections. So on Nature Methods, 10 years ago almost, this guy here, Bang Wong, and it's not here, but Martin something in this slide it appears here, Martin Krzywiński, let's call him Martin, it's hard to say his name. They, every week or every edition, they had like one paper on different aspects of data viz, being how to plot stuff or how to draw diagrams. And this is actually how I started learning how to do these type of things. And now I not only I do freelance, but I work in a company where I help scientists make good plots, let's say. And I learned a lot by reading this article. So this would be like the main reference I wanted to point out to you. Of course, you have all the typical National Geographic, Scientific American, etc. to check for nice diagrams. But what matters in this part of the field is basically it's a signal to noise ratio kind of problem, right? So while doing diagrams or even plots, you're trying to enhance the signal of the thing that you want to show and decrease the noise. It's also an exercise of clarity. And so, you know, you can basically learn a lot on these two aspects here by reading these papers. I would need like 2 hours to be able to tell you all about these. So, and finally, yeah, so basically, illustrative diagrams is the thing that I do the most. And so basically diagrams for publications in articles, either flow diagrams or protocols, or diagrams that can appear on a review. So things that kind of exemplify a big concept or a way that people are thinking about, or grants, right? But I cannot show you the grants because I think they are they cannot be shown, I think. And then, like, finally, and these are my last 2 slides, you can merge together the outreach part. Where you would think that maybe you can only show editorial illustration, something metaphorical, with the more information graphics part. So these are panels that I prepared for an exhibition about the brain, and so I'm Portuguese, and I was working in this Portuguese museum, let's say, for 1 year, and we generated an exhibition on the brain, and I created the infographic panels. So it was very nice to be able to create these information-rich panels that people, general audience, I saw someone saying that let's try not to talk about general audiences, but this was actually from youngsters to old people. They came to the exhibition and they just stayed there and like looking at these Egyptian hieroglyphs, almost trying to decipher them, and having fun with it. And this for me was these are pictures taken by me, like a stalker, just going behind people, and it was a chance to witness how people relate in the normal world with a scientific illustration. So this is what I wanted to tell you. I hope I wasn't so fast, but next time that someone delivers you like a business card saying that they are they do design for science, you kind of know a little bit more of what they're talking about. Yeah, thanks for having me.